The arena buzzed with anticipation, thousands of fans chanting, their voices merging into an electrifying roar that shook the rafters. The night was set for a showdown unlike any other. Roman Reigns, the undisputed champion, was moments away from defending his title in the main event. Everything was on the line, and nothing could break his focus. Or so he thought. Just as he tightened the tape around his wrists, a production assistant rushed into his locker room, breathless and clutching a small, unmarked envelope. "This was left for you," the assistant stammered before hurrying away. Roman frowned, his instincts immediately on high alert. Who would send him a letter now, of all times? And why not just hand it to him directly? The weight of the moment hung in the air as he turned the envelope over in his hands, feeling the slight indentation of the paper beneath his fingertips. Something about this didn't feel right. He exhaled sharply, pushing back the flicker of unease creeping into his mind. He had faced every obstacle imaginable: betrayals, ambushes, mind games, but this was different. This was personal. Carefully, he slid his finger beneath the seal and tore it open. A single sheet of paper lay inside, its edges slightly crumpled as if handled with urgency. The first line sent a chill down his spine. "You're not as invincible as you think." His grip on the letter tightened. His eyes darted across the words, scanning for clues, but there was no signature, no hint of who had written it. Just a warning. A threat? A message from an enemy lurking in the shadows? The longer he stared at it, the more questions flooded his mind. His heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained unreadable. He couldn't let anyone see the crack in his armor. Not now. Not when everything was riding on this match. He folded the letter, slipping it into his gear bag, then took a deep breath. He needed to focus. He needed to push this out of his mind. But how could he? Just outside that door, an arena filled with thousands of screaming fans awaited him. His opponents were preparing. The cameras were rolling. But now, so was something else, something unseen, something unknown. The knock on the door came seconds later. "Main event's up next," a voice called. Roman nodded, though his mind was still tangled in the words of the letter. He rolled his shoulders, shook off the unease, and stood. Whoever sent this message wanted to get inside his head. He couldn't allow it. Not now. Now. Not ever. He adjusted his championship belt over his shoulder and stepped out into the hallway, the echoes of the crowd growing louder with every step. Yet, as he walked toward the entrance, a strange feeling gnawed at him. What if the threat wasn't just mind games? What if something bigger was at play? And most importantly, who sent the letter? As Roman Reigns made his way down the dimly lit hallway, every step echoed off the concrete walls, each footfall heavier than the last. The weight of the championship on his shoulder was familiar, but tonight, it felt different, like an anchor dragging him down. The letter still lingered in his mind, each word seared into his thoughts. Who had sent it? Was it just another attempt to throw him off his game, or was this something far more sinister? His gut told him it wasn't just some last-minute intimidation tactic. There was intent behind it, something calculated, something meant to shake him. And if that was the goal, it was working more than he wanted to admit. He turned a corner and caught sight of Paul Heyman waiting for him near the entrance. The wise man's usual confidence was etched into his expression, but as Roman approached, Heyman's eyes flickered with something else: concern. It was subtle, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know him, but Roman did. He could see it. And if Paul Heyman was concerned, that meant this wasn't just in his head. He slowed his stride for just a moment. Had Heyman heard something? Did he know about the letter? The urge to ask burned in his chest, but he pushed it down. This wasn't the time. Instead, he gave a simple nod, his usual smirk playing at the edge of his lips. No one needed to know what was going on inside his head. The music hit, and the roar of the crowd flooded through the entrance tunnel. The energy was electric, a sea of voices chanting his name, some cheering, others booing, but all locked in on him. He stepped through the curtain, his expression unreadable, his movements controlled. The arena was his battlefield, and no one could see doubt in the eyes of a king. Yet, even as he raised his title high for the world to see, his mind was elsewhere. The letter still burned in his pocket, a reminder that something or someone was lurking in the shadows. Meanwhile, somewhere in the arena, a figure sat in the darkness of a private suite, watching the champion's every move. The flickering lights from the jumbo screen cast eerie shadows across their face, their fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest of their seat. They had been waiting for this moment, for the doubt to creep in, for the cracks in Roman's confidence to form. A smirk tugged at the corner of their lips. The letter was just the beginning. Back in the ring, the announcer's voice boomed through the arena, introducing the competitors. Roman barely registered the words. His focus was razor-sharp on his opponent, studying their movements, searching for any sign that they were involved in this. Every glance, every shift in stance, it all felt like a clue, like a puzzle he was trying to solve while still keeping his title intact. But no matter how much he tried to shake it, the weight of the unknown pressed down on him. Was the threat in the ring with him? Or was it still waiting in the shadows, watching, planning the next move? As the referee raised the title high and called for the bell, Roman's instincts kicked in, forcing everything else out of his mind. He had a fight to win. But even as he locked up with his opponent, throwing every ounce of his strength into the match, he knew this battle wasn't just about the championship anymore. It was about something bigger, something unseen. And whoever was behind it, they weren't done yet. The moment the bell rang, Roman Reigns pushed everything aside, every question, every doubt, every lingering thought about the letter, and focused on what he did best. The match unfolded with brutal intensity, each strike, each counter, each moment drawing the crowd deeper into the spectacle. His opponent was relentless, forcing him to dig deeper, push harder. But even as he fought with every ounce of strength, something felt off. Not in the way his opponent moved, not in the rhythm of the match, but in the back of his mind. It was as if he was being watched in a way that was different from the usual cameras and audience eyes. A presence he couldn't shake. Then, in the chaos of the battle, it happened. A moment of distraction, just a flicker of movement near the barricade, a silhouette shifting through the crowd. Roman caught it in his peripheral vision just as he dodged a clothesline, his instincts taking over. The sight of someone moving with purpose, slipping past security unnoticed, sent a jolt through him. But before he could react, his opponent capitalized on the distraction, slamming him down hard onto the mat. The impact rattled his bones, but his mind was already elsewhere. The match wasn't the real battle anymore. The real fight was happening outside the ring. Paul Heyman was on the outside, pacing, shouting instructions, but his usual composure had cracked. He had seen it too, the figure, the movement, the way the energy in the arena shifted. Roman struggled to his feet, shaking off the pain, forcing himself to focus. His opponent was gearing up for the final move, but Roman, with the instincts of a warrior, countered at the last possible second. With sheer force, he turned the tide, hoisting his opponent onto his shoulders before driving him into the mat with a thunderous impact. The referee dropped for the count. 1, 2, 3. The bell rang. The championship remained his, but the victory felt hollow. The second the referee handed him the title, he barely had time to raise it before his eyes locked onto the same shadowed figure now standing just beyond the barricade. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there as if waiting. Roman's breathing was steady, controlled, but inside, his blood was boiling. He wasn't the kind of man to let someone play games with him, especially not in his world. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the ring, the title still clutched in his hand, ignoring the commentary team, ignoring the officials trying to keep him back. The crowd roared as he advanced, his presence alone enough to part the sea of fans between him and the unknown threat. But just as he was about to reach them, security swarmed in, pushing him back, blocking his path. And in that split second, the figure turned and disappeared into the crowd. Roman clenched his jaw, his chest rising and falling with slow, controlled breaths. He had been seconds away from getting answers, from ending whatever this was before it could escalate further. But instead, all he was left with was more questions. As he turned back toward the ring, Heyman was already there, waiting. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a look Roman had seen before. A look that told him Heyman knew something but wasn't saying it. Roman stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Heyman could hear. "Tell me what you know." Heyman hesitated, his fingers twitching as if debating whether to speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "It wasn't just a letter, my tribal chief. It was a warning." Roman didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't show the storm brewing inside him. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And whoever had sent that letter, whoever had stood in the shadows watching him, they weren't done yet.